Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to another episode of 5 Influential Horror Movies, a series where I talk to all kinds of horror lovers about their 5 most influential horror movies and why they picked them. Today, I'm joined a second time. We were just talking about this, about how long it's been, by Anthony Brownlee. It's been over a year. Doesn't quite feel like it, but we were just talking about that, and it's been a while since you've been here.
It definitely does not feel like a year.
It does. It definitely does not. We've been trying to do this for
right.
People.
Yes.
And if for anybody who does content or anything of the like, it's very difficult to schedule things when life just keeps, so it's been very busy.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to kind of reintroduce you, and I specifically want to talk about the Fred Head documentary and give you a couple minutes to talk about that. But you are a horror author and a documentary filmmaker. Huge, and it will be very apparent as we go through this list where a lot of your inspiration comes from. But I just kind of wanted to give you, an opportunity, especially to talk about the documentary. All of Anthony's links will be in the description for this episode, so you'll be able to find him and his books. But yeah, I just wanted to talk. It's still available streaming. Fred Head.
Yes, it is still on Tubi, and I believe it's still on Prime. I think Prime you can rent it for maybe like $1.99 or something like that. But Tubi, it's obviously free.
Yeah. And I just kind of wanted you to kind of reintroduce people as to what that is about and kind of how that came to be.
So Fred Head's the documentary is basically a journey that started 7 years ago now, in a friend's basement. Just an idea of really just trying to originally see how the fans, got their collections and, some of their stories, but then as we, went on, it became so much more personal because we realized as we were telling our own stories, just like how significant Nightmare was in our lives. And we was like, this can't just be us. Like we have to, open this question up, bigger to people, bigger to the fans. And it was such an amazing, thing to go through, just to talk to so many people. And I mean, all over the world, we sent like submissions, from the UK that we got back.
Wow.
It was, just incredible. And it was like, Fred Heads became this huge thing of just finding people finding a family. In horror. And it was because of this franchise, that they found that family, which is the friends that I had that I made it with. That's how we all became friends, is because we were all lovers of A Nightmare on Elm Street. We didn't grow up together. We all lived in different states, but we found each other, so it was such a great experience. We learned more about each other. We've been friends for years, and there were, new things that I was learning and, new things they learned about me. And, I couldn't have asked for, a better experience than, filming that documentary.
I love to hear that. Like, I think, people on the outside of the horror world, right, who aren't super into the genre or who won't give it a chance. I've definitely had people make comments to me about how weird it is that I like horror. Oh, you're into that horror stuff, that kind of thing. But I think it's interesting because I think for most of us in the horror community, we have found exactly what you mentioned in these connections through horror, is like friendships and family ties and really long-term, relationships that we nurture and help grow strictly because we have that shared love, whether it's specifically for a film or a franchise or just the genre as a whole. And it's been crazy to think about doing content and how many more people I've connected with strictly based on the premise that we either love a specific movie, like I said, or the genre as a whole. And it can be a surprisingly powerful thing. So I love that you had that experience.
Absolutely. Definitely a powerful thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, go watch the documentary. If it's on Tubi for free, but if you're feeling like really supporting indie horror and especially documentary filmmaking. Check it out on Amazon, on Prime.
Oh, and it is
Um,
still available, I forgot, on DVD. If you're a physical
oh,
media
physical
collector,
media. There you
you
go.
can definitely get it on DVD on Amazon as well.
Perfect. Yeah. So do all of those things. Yeah. Well, that's probably as good a segue as any into what your first one is going to be, right? So, we'll go ahead and jump into your list. Your very first film, of course, that we're going to talk about is obviously A Nightmare
No,
on
no,
Elm
no.
Street.
Yes, it is the crown jewel in my level
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
It just I saw it at age 5,
Oh,
and
wow.
it just yeah, yeah. And I mean, the first one, it is absolutely terrifying. You know what Wes
Yes.
did, and I still remember I was at my cousin's house, and we were. It was I think it was like summertime, and we were either bored or it might have been raining or something like that. And
Sure.
my aunt ended up showing us this VHS, which was actually recorded from HBO, so it had that old school, HBO like opening, and
Yeah.
like way
Yeah.
before like how it is now. So it was very old
Mhm.
school, and
Yeah.
from the first time I saw that image of Freddie just making that glove. I mean, it's just been ingrained into my head, and I was absolutely terrified. Like I had never I like I said, I that was really the first horror movie I ever seen, and
Wow.
it shook me to my core. I feel like I didn't even really know what terror was until I saw A
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And so we watched it, and I was, like I said, I was terrified, but I wanted to watch it more.
Needed more of it.
I needed more.
Yeah.
I was scared every single time, but I
Couldn't
just
get
had to
enough.
watch it. And what's kind of wild is people always say, "Oh, Freddy, latched on to you, didn't he?" I was like, "Well, yeah, he actually is my favorite villain." But what really got me coming back to Nightmare every single time was actually Nancy Thompson.
Yes, who you've met multiple times, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. She's become a friend, at
I
this
love
point.
that. That's awesome. Yeah.
And she was very supportive with the documentary. She gave us a
Yeah.
lot of tips, and because we were first time, obviously, documentary makers,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
so
Yeah.
she gave us a lot of tips, and
Yeah.
shared some advice because she did Iron Nancy,
Yep.
beforehand. And so she's just been, was such a great help during that process. And
Oh,
like
that's
I
so
said,
cool.
she's been such a friend, and I just love her. Like
Yeah.
she's just, she has been my number one heroine since I saw Nightmare on Elm Street. There's nobody that's ever taken her place since I was 5 years old. It's never been, well, maybe now that I'm getting like, no,
No,
Nancy
it's
Thompson
always
has been
Nancy. I
number
love
one.
that.
Yeah. She was just so strong. She
Yep.
was very proactive, is which I love. That's the best way I can
Yep.
say proactive. She wasn't, waiting for somebody to rescue her. She wasn't,
Right.
she wanted to take charge, and
Yeah.
she went after Freddie. And that's what I love the most. She went after him. Like you didn't see that, especially a lot back then. In the '80s, like most of the time those girls they had on, maybe learning of the real danger like 15 to 20 minutes before the movie ended, and they spend most of their times reacting to the
Mhm.
killer by running, and and they just happen to
It's luck.
survive.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
Nancy, she made sure she survived. I mean, she set up those booby traps, and
Yep.
she lured Freddie. She was taunting him, and
Mhm.
and then she faces him head on in that bedroom, and just faces him with
Yeah.
those words, like those strong words of hers, and and she beats him. And I was like, oh, like I just love it. She's just like, oh man, it's like she's just like the template for me of what
I love
you
that.
know
Yeah.
a final girl or heroine's supposed to be. Like they always say, like, Laurie Strode, and I like, and not that I don't dislike Laurie Strode, I just felt like she was
Yeah.
more of a scream queen for
There is a
sure.
difference. There's a
Yes,
difference there for
yes,
sure. She's definitely a lucked into it
yes.
kind of experience, and not as
Hmm.
gets to a place where she is a strong gonna do something, but it takes a
Right,
long time. You're not talking
right.
about the first movie in a franchise, like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
completely
and
different. Yeah.
and that's why Nancy's always been number one for me. Because I actually didn't see like fully see Halloween until I was about, I want to say 11.
Okay.
And obviously, I'd seen Nightmare at 5. So in between that time, like before
Yeah.
I had seen Halloween,
Mhm,
I'd seen like, I think the first Scream had come out,
mhm.
and I had seen like Hellraiser, and I would
Yeah.
see these strong, girls like,
Yeah.
Kirsty Cotton and,
Yep.
Sidney Prescott. And, so then when I kind of went back to Laura, I was like, I kind of wish she, was a
Yeah.
little bit stronger like this. And then, H2O came along later on, and she actually went after Michael, but it was, it's cool. I said, yeah, I'm glad, she finally had that
Right.
moment. I'm like, but I've seen this, before. I've seen it in Nancy Thompson, years before, and
Yeah.
saw it with Sidney Prescott, and like I said, Kirsty Cotton. So they're like
Yep.
actually my top three. So that's
Yeah.
why, it's just very proactive of her. Not that's what I use her as a template for not
Yeah.
just my final like lead heroines in my books, but my male heroes too. Like there's a little bit of Nancy in there.
I love that. I was actually going to ask if anything, if you pulled from Nightmare in your writing. I was actually going to ask that,
Mm-hmm.
but and it's interesting because I think I know the answer to this. You were not a fan of the remake.
Absolutely not.
Okay, but you did see it,
But I
right?
did see it. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I've actually seen it multiple times because
Oh, okay, okay. I know there are some people who are like really, really big, Nightmare on Elm Street fans, as
I.
for the franchise, who won't even watch it. But I couldn't remember if you were one that had seen it or not seen it, so I just had to ask.
Yeah, it's like I had to watch it. I just
I
really
get
had to
that,
see
yeah.
what they did. And honestly, when I like even now all these years later, like I said, I've seen it
Yeah.
multiple times. I mean, I own it. I mean, I'm just that collector. Like I just had to have
Yeah.
like all the incarnations. But
Mm,
and as
yeah,
I watched it more, it's like I'm not really. It's not upset like I'm mad at the actors or I
sure.
thought they gave really good performance. Even Jackie, like he. I
He did
mean,
the best with what he was given.
right. I mean, you're stepping into like super iconic shoes. I mean,
Big deal, yeah.
there's not much, that you can do with that, but try and make it your own, which I
Yeah.
think he did. And I give the film some credits, and I love that it went back to the darker roots of Nightmare because I've
Yeah.
always loved darker Freddy, as
Yeah, it
opposed
went
to
away from the
MTV
comedy. Yeah.
Freddy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I thought the young actors, I thought they did really good. I
Yeah.
was disappointed with how they did with Nancy. I felt Nancy Holbrook was more of uh I, I don't know. She wasn't like, well, she kind of was a little proactive, but I felt like she kind of had that
Yeah.
victimization to her, like the kind of
She
like the damsel in distress a little
Yeah,
bit.
she's a
And
little weaker. Yeah.
yeah, and I was just kind
Yeah.
of like I didn't
You're
really
right.
quite feel that with her. And that's why I'm always glad that they gave her a different last name, so
At least there's
Nancy
a
Holbrook
differentiation. Yeah.
versus Nancy Thompson. And so,
Right.
but I just felt the story it just didn't have that original essence, that original magic that Wes,
Yeah, I get
gave
that.
us. Which I mean, obviously that can be emulated again, but
Right.
I
I
just
know
felt
what you
like
mean though.
you could at least, grab a hold at least of some of it. But I just didn't feel like this movie did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, we're still on the same topic here. So we'll we'll do the second one too, which is New Nightmare.
ooh, yes. New Nightmare. I
This is
fell in
the
love with,
meta
oh,
one. This is the
yes.
meta one, right? Okay. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to make I think I may have told you this last summer, but I actually just watched all of them for the very first time. Well, I'd seen the first one and I'd seen Dream
Mm-hmm.
Warriors, but I'd watched the rest of them for the very first time last summer.
Man, that is
Yeah. I know.
wild. Oh wow.
So I just saw this
Man.
one for the first time literally last summer. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I saw it back in '95. I didn't get a chance to see it at the movies, but
Sure.
I saw the buildup, as a kid. Like there was so many commercials and TV spots about it, like back then, which I still
Yeah.
remember to this day. Which a lot of people, if you weren't really there to like see those, like
Mhm.
you wouldn't really remember them because I haven't seen them like in any disc or any special editions or anything. But this was a
Yeah.
huge deal with New Nightmare coming out because everybody thought it was over, and Wes was back, and Heather was back, and it was just really big,
Yeah.
and my cousins again saw it over there at the same house. They had actually rented it, and
Mhm.
my cousin had my one cousin Josh. He had actually seen it first with the next door neighbor, and
Okay.
then I came over, and then his sister had just come from somewhere, and they were already kind of like telling us about like it's so different. It's like Nancy, but they're not calling her Nancy. They're calling her by a real name, and I was like 9 years old at the time, so I'm like super like what like
What's
I'm
going
like
on?
super confused. Like what do you mean?
Uh-huh.
Like and there's like you just have to
Yeah.
watch it and just watching it like it blew me away. I'd never seen anything like so meta, and like I didn't even know what meta was, at that
Sure.
time, and it was so different. And the fact that it was supposed to be real, that Freddie was, this
The- yeah.
entity that was captured because of storytellers, and that it's been around for centuries.
Yeah. Pretty
Um,
cool.
it was just that's why I love Wes. Wes is just always outdoing himself. I mean,
Taking it to that next level,
yes.
reinventing the wheel every time. Like, yeah, it's because my first dose of meta, because again, obviously I just saw this last year. So
Mm-hmm.
my first kind of intro to horror that was kind of meta in not necessarily in the exact same way, but of course was Scream. And
Right,
so
right. Which
but
this was a precursor that we'll
right.
find
So
out.
it's like going back and see, or, going last summer and watching this for the first time and seeing this. And even this really is on its own level. It's
Absolutely.
not a Scream type of meta. It's a very just different kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
on its own. And it's very unique. And it's kind of like exactly like what you said about the original. Like that was something that if ever done again will never feel the same because it's already
Yeah.
been,
Mm-mm.
that magic of doing that in this setting, especially in the horror genre. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's been done like it and it's been done masterfully, so it's not something
Yes.
that's going to be replicated later on.
Absolutely. There's just like no way. See, and that's another reason why me particularly, I
Mhm.
don't look at Nightmare as a slasher franchise. I never have, because
Yeah,
to me
that's
it's so much deeper than that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When I think of slashers though, I think of like straightforward people hurting people. It's
Yeah.
hard for me to
Mm-hmm.
put something like this that has well, it does definitely has a lot of layers and a lot of things going on with it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also supernatural.
Right.
And I know there are people who do consider it a slasher, and that's
Slasher.
fine, but
Right.
I have a hard time if it's got anything other than people hurting people, it's hard for me to kind of put it in a slasher category,
Mm-hmm.
as on its own because it does do a lot more than that. You're not talking about a man that's alive that's chasing people with knives on his hands. Like that's not what's happening. So it's very like
Right.
so yeah,
Because it.
this one was great. It was an interesting. It's always so interesting to go back and watch older horror franchises, like the ones that laid the foundation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to go see them as a first watch, like in my 30s.
That's awesome though. To me, like if I could ever like rewatch them again, like with a blank slate, like that,
Yeah.
like that would just been like still like so cool.
Yeah, I think the one that I did that was like the most disappointing to fans was probably the Halloween franchise because I'd only seen like 2 or 3 of those. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to watch all of those for this one of the summer lives we did this summer. And I'm not super impressed with that franchise.
Chives,
And so
yeah,
it was one of those things, but it's good to go back and watch them though, because you get to experience it for the first time, of course, but then you get to go back to kind of the building blocks of things that were done later or that are we'll eventually see more of or things that are connected to it later. And I think that's really cool to be able to go back and do that.
yeah. I mean, and that's like kind of like the trouble a little bit with when more layers of stories are added. It
Yeah.
starts off as a simple thing, but it's like, well,
Yeah.
now we have this film, and like now we have this film, and it's like more
Yeah.
has to be added because you have to reveal more, and you have to
Yep.
do more, and so
You're
it kind
right.
of peels back more and more layers. And
Yep.
I mean, obviously I feel like some sequels are always kind of as good, and then there's some that are always not
Sure.
as good. And
Yeah.
so it's just the layers of a story, like it's
Yeah.
it's always going to happen, like no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Um I think that your next one, I don't think it has been on here before, but I'm actually really excited to talk about it. And that one is Tales from the Hood.
True. Yes.
This
I
is
saw.
one of my, let me just be honest with you. This is one of my favorite horror movies. It's one of
Oh
my
wow.
absolute favorites. I saw this for the first time when I was probably way too young to be watching
Mhm.
it. And I've never forgotten it as long as I live. And it's a constant, like, I will sit down and watch this any day of the week, anytime. Like, I absolutely love this movie. So when I saw that it was on your list, I was like, yes.
Yeah, I usually don't hear. I mean, I know a lot of people, like this movie, love this movie, but
Oh, I
I just
love
don't
it.
hear it get talked about,
It
enough.
really doesn't.
And I'm like, man, because I saw it, way too young too. Like I saw all my horror movies, like if I'm being honest, like saw them
Yeah.
like way too young. But this movie just captured me because it, you know, was so different, and it took the idea of what I like, especially as a writer, when you can take ideas that aren't necessarily like when people think horror automatically,
Sure.
you're taking things like, racism and
Yep.
classism,
Yep.
um, you know, ab- abuse, domestic abuse, and
Yep.
um, violence,
Mhm.
and because when you think of that stuff, you think about action movie violence, but
Sure.
this is all set in a horror film, and when
Mhm.
you can actually put those in horror elements and make them, scary, like that's, you know so interesting to me. And I
Yeah.
mean, because if you think, like violence and domestic abuse, obviously those things are scary,
Sure.
and in real life, it's just like I said, you just don't picture them when you're thinking about like a typical horror movie, so it threw me in that way, but I love that it threw me because
Mhm.
it just shows you just how deep it can all go,
Yeah.
and the things that we really don't want to think about, in life, but thrown in your face. Because in the very last story, hardcore convert, that's actually my favorite of all the
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
because I mean, I didn't know if you know, but like when he's on that slab and he's seeing all the
Yeah.
images, like all the colored images are obviously from the movie, but all that black and white,
That's
photography, that
real.
that was all real. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, those images are like embedded in my brain,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
these are things that I was told when I was, a kid from, my grandparents,
Yeah.
things that they had either seen or witnessed,
Experienced.
or
Yeah.
experience heard about. And because my
Yeah.
grandparents, they're from like rural West Virginia,
Okay.
before they moved, uh to the Midwest. And they
Mhm.
had a lot of stories, and
Yeah.
it just hearing them sometimes, it was scary. And we had to, as an 11-year-old, I had my first taste of it,
Yeah.
growing up. Me and my cousins, we were, we were, yeah, about 11. One of my cousins,
Mhm.
she was probably about 12, 11 or 12, and we were taunted
Yeah.
by a group of skinheads.
Oh my god.
And it was absolutely terrifying, as a kid, because these were like, 19, 20, 21-year old,
They're older. Yeah.
guys. And we were it was, that was scary. That's something you
Yeah.
hear about, but this would have been like, maybe the mid 90s, but we had never experienced that.
Yeah.
And so, once we got back to our grandparents' house, we like, they kind of like had a talk with us.
Yeah.
And the elements with this movie, it would, it was just, it really hit, because it's like I could really feel that. I kind of, after I got that taste of it, because I think I was about 11 when I saw this movie for the first
Sure.
time, so
Yeah.
around that time.
Yeah.
So this movie is like very deep, and it was relevant then, and what's crazy is it's still relevant now.
Very relevant now. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I have to say, being on obviously coming from a different perspective on it, I did not grow up in a very we love everybody kind of house, to put it
mhm,
plain, as simple and nicely as I can.
yeah,
But I went to a lot of very mixed up schools. I got to see kids that didn't always look like me, and I think that
mhm,
at home, I'm being told this very specific picture of reality, right? And then I go out
mhm,
into the world and I'm experiencing something different. And then I see this movie as I don't know if I was 11, but if I had to guess based on what I know it made me feel, I had to have been somewhere close to that when I saw this for the first time as well.
Mm,
And I remember, the way that it made me feel pretty clearly, given that even though I was really young, because this was a side of the stories that I never got to hear because I was only told the racist side, the side of hate and disdain for no
mhm,
reason. And that was all I ever heard about. And so coming in and coming from a white family and watching something like this and
mhm,
experiencing it, even at that age, it was very, very much life changing, I think, because like I said, I went to school. I had friends, all kinds of friends,
right.
and and my friends came from all kinds of backgrounds, and it was very, and I grew up not feeling the way about the world that my parents raised me to feel. I'm very, very different. and
Mhm,
um and so it's I love horror that has a message.
yeah.
And as scary as it is to think about its relevancy ever, it's crazy to still think, like you said, that it's so relevant, right? Like, you could literally watch this movie right now if you've never seen it before
Mhm,
and relate to it because of either your own experiences or someone else that or someone that you love's experience, or different things, because it is so relevant. And it's to take
absolutely.
something so deep like that and construct it in such really great storytelling
Mhm.
and make it horror scary and not just real life scary is like chef's kiss. Like, it just
Yes.
does all of that so well, because you're scared, you're nervous, you're unsettled, but you're also feeling sadness, you're disheartened, you're disgusted, you're angry, you're feeling all these things when you're watching it, and you're scared. And I don't think that
Mhm.
when horror has a message, it's not always an easy thing to balance the two. So this
Yeah.
is just like on a pedestal for me in that regard.
Mhm. Absolutely. Like you like you like hit the nail.
Yeah.
Like it just because that, like you said, that's very hard to do. Like,
Yeah,
and
it is.
a horror setting and like have that particular message and like have
Yeah.
it work. Like this movie
Mhm.
like works with, I mean, every single story hits. You
Yeah.
know, it
Oh,
just
yeah.
it's just like I said, the fact that it makes you uncomfortable because those subjects are like very taboo, especially back
Yeah.
then, and nobody
Sure.
really wanted to talk about them. It's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, it goes on, but let's not,
We
but
can't address it.
you
Right.
have to,
You
if you
do.
don't face what it is, I mean, it's just gonna fester,
Yep.
and that's
Took the word right out of my mouth. Yep.
what, we were taught, like this, like, these things are going to happen and you just have to face them. It might not always be fun, it might not always be
Yeah.
comfortable, but you have to face them. And that kind of goes back to Nightmare on Elm Street, which is why I love it, because
Yeah.
Nancy and Freddie, Freddie's, he's up there, like, you have to fall asleep,
Yeah.
and Nancy just had that resolve, like, either he's going to get me or I'm going to get him, but either way I'm going to face it, I'm going to
Yeah.
do something, you
Yeah.
know and that's that's actually my favorite word, is enough. It's such a powerful word. It's when you
Yep.
have that resolve to just say enough
Enough.
and just do
Powerful. Yeah.
whatever it is you have to do. Like I said, no matter you come out on the other side or you
Yeah.
succumb to it, but the point
Yeah.
is that you faced it, and I think that's
Yeah.
such a powerful thing.
It is. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I am with you too on the fact that I don't feel like Tales from the Hood is talked about. Now, you know what's crazy? As much as I love this one, I have actually not seen the sequel. Have you seen the sequel?
I did see the sequel and I wasn't impressed,
Oh no.
unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it.
was just curious because I know I never see anybody talk about that one either, but I haven't seen it personally, so I
Mhm.
didn't know if it's any good or not.
I actually only liked one of the stories that they had because it was actually about Emmett Till, and it was the very last story.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it, like, I don't want to spoil it, but the way
Sure.
that they do it, it's like kind of like this whoa, because it has this like fantasy supernatural
Okay.
appeal to it, like as they're doing it, and it's very raw, and like it really makes you, you know,
Okay.
kind of see certain things from a different perspective. Is the
Yeah.
best way I can try to like say it without like
Sure.
trying to ruin it. But it,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say
I
watch it just for like your own
I
personal,
intend to
just to
watch
kind of
it.
see. But yeah, that last story I think is probably the
Okay.
most significant and the most powerful story out of
Yeah,
part
I
two.
intend to watch it. I just I kind of keep forgetting that it exists
Yeah,
because I love the first
yeah.
one so much. I've seen the first one so many, like I can probably almost quote it
Hmm.
line for line. But I've never gotten to the second one. I keep meaning to. But no, it's on my list for sure. I'm gonna watch it. I need to anyway, just given how much I love the first one, even if I don't end up liking it as much.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so your fourth one is I think it's only been on here one other time, and that's The People Under the Stairs,
Yes, yes. Very
which is
classic.
also such a great movie. I saw
Hmm.
this one too young too.
Right. But I said this one, in a sense, like I said, like I said, this one definitely not a slasher. This one, kind of hits again on that, idea of like taking um real life instances. Obviously,
Yep.
there's a lot of poverty in this, classism, racism,
Yep. Yep.
um,
Yep.
in this, and they, Wes, flips it and turns it into horror, and just the idea of these people that are trapped in this
Oh,
house, and the who initially two people you think are like husband and wife, and then you find out that they're brother and sister, and it
oh, it's wild.
and it's just like so crazy, and you have this unlikely hero and fool,
I love him.
and
Yeah.
he was so great,
He
and
killed it. Yeah.
that was the first time in horror really that I saw someone who looked like me. And I
Oh
think that's
yeah.
why it, really grabbed onto me so
That
much,
makes
because
sense. Yeah.
because he almost, I said, that could be me. Like, just looking at him,
Right.
that could be
I get
me.
that.
And I love that because, obviously in the 80s, it was, more about the final girl. And I mean, yeah, you had
Yeah.
like some final boys, but you never really had people of color in those roles.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So they may have been more like the sidekick or the secondary character, or
Sure.
something like that.
Yep.
So this film was very like significant in that, and it, the way, and that's why Wes, he always considered him somebody who was very, very open and very diverse. He talked about
Yeah.
so many different issues, and
Mhm.
he
Yep.
was always somebody who wanted to be different, and do things different, and hit on things that
Yeah.
weren't talked about,
Yeah.
and using characters that you don't really see,
Mhm.
um characters that, like I said, because he became the unexpected hero. Like nobody would have ever probably gone into this thinking a
Nope.
12-year-old young black kid was going to be the hero of
The
this
hero,
movie.
the whole thing. Yeah.
And he was strong. I mean, he started off kind of like, oh my god, like which anybody would have, because just seeing
Yeah.
all the stuff in that house. I mean, that it was like a fun house almost, or like
It
horror,
was crazy.
you
Yeah.
know. And
No,
then,
for sure.
but he grows, and
Yes.
because of his strength, it gives Alice strength.
Yeah.
To where she can kind of stand up against who her mother, because they're the ones that had more of that complex relationship, to where she was able to kind of say
Yes.
that enough to her and kind of battle her,
Yeah.
which I love, which
Yeah, for sure.
it was just such a cool dichotomy. Like, you have
Yeah.
this character here and this character here, and then this character,
Oh, yeah, so
you
good.
know, it just, yeah, there's just so many elements of this film that, you know, like I said, again, resonate. And it's another one of the things that made me want to, write and tell stories so much, because I wanted
Mhm.
to really put those characters, those people of color, in these leading roles, and say
Yeah.
like, yeah, these characters can be the hero or the heroine. They can
Yeah,
fight back. They
absolutely.
can,
Yeah.
stand against, the beast, or whoever it is that's coming
Yes.
after them. And I really wanted to make sure stories like that are heard, so like people, kids like me who are growing up, like the next generation, they can
I was just
already
about to say
be
that.
in tune to that, and like see, oh, it's more of a, oh, okay, it's more of a, this is like normal, as
This is
opposed to
yeah.
when I saw it, it was like this
It's
radical
so
thing, and
out of the norm, yeah.
you
No,
know
I was just gonna say that exact same thing, that representation carried into the next group is super,
hmm
super important. It's and all forms of media, books,
right,
TV, movies, music, whatever. Like, it
Absolutely.
matters because you're exactly right. Like you, and even, and it's like kind of going backwards a little bit to one of the things I feel about like Tales from the Hood is that like, I think those types of things benefit people like me that grew up
Mm-hmm.
on in those houses, because if I had been maybe in a different situation, I don't know. I like to think that the whole nature versus nurture thing, right? Of like, I like to believe that I just would have ended up the same regardless. But you
Right.
know, I'm having been on the other side of it and seeing that, then that becomes the norm for me too, which I feel like hopefully lowers the likelihood that I'll end up like the others,
Right.
because it's like, a thing I hear all the time is like, well, why does everything have to be about that? And I'm like, well, you didn't care when everybody that was on TV was heterosexual white people. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like
Right.
you only have a problem with it now because other people get to see themselves on the scenes,
Right.
right? Like it wasn't an issue when everybody was you. So I
Yeah.
think there's an obvious like, so but I to your point, exactly like you said, like you writing those characters, having those people at the next group, that will just be what's expected, what they look for, what they love, instead of hoping that maybe they could be them. They'll be thinking it could
Mm-hmm.
be me, like 100%, right? And I
Right.
think that's amazing. I love the way you said that. That was perfect.
It was, everybody wants to, feel seen and like I said, feel
Yeah.
represented and make sure that,
Yeah.
that not just my stories are told, but your stories are told. And, the
Hmm.
person's over here stories are told.
Yep.
And,
Everybody.
it's just so important. That's why, I love literature, and that's why I don't believe in banning books. I don't
Sure.
believe in, um, you know, uh, rewriting history or,
Yeah.
taking things out of history. It's just
Yep.
that's just not going to benefit anybody. You know,
No.
like history isn't supposed to be wrapped up in a bow and be like the prettiest thing ever. It's history is
Yeah.
complex, but at the same time, we learn from history.
Yeah.
Like so we need those stories to know, like, okay, this is what they did. Now, what do we need to do that's different?
That's better.
So
Yeah.
that's what I think a lot of those films like say uh People Under Stairs and
Yep.
Tales from the Hood hit on, like,
Yeah.
really strongly. And even Nightmare, like I said, it's
Yep.
not, why does the female always have to fall down? Why does she always need a man to come and protect her? Like,
Yeah.
no, they can do it themselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's why I think I just feel so strongly about those.
Yeah.
And it's just, like I said, obviously three of the movies I picked were, all Wes.
Right.
Touched by Wes, because he just,
Sure.
I felt like
Yeah.
he just had that magic touch, and he really
Yeah.
I felt like Wes empathized with everyone. He,
Yeah.
like I
I would
said,
agree with that. Yeah.
he was a teacher first, which I think,
Yeah.
kind of opened him up. And and he
Yeah.
was
I'm sure it
obviously,
did.
born in the 30s, but he had such an open mind. Like, I felt like
Yeah.
Wes was just like almost like an aging hippie, almost like a
Yeah.
very smart aging hippie. Like, he just, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the way I was always, taught. Like my
Yeah.
grandmother, I've always heard her words, even as a, an adult. Like, she always told me, she says, no matter what, she said, love everybody. And she would tell me that so often as a kid. And then she said, you don't have to
Yeah.
like them, but love them. And I was like, and I was just like, what? I said, how do I love them and not like them? Like, I was so confused by that. But as I've gotten older,
Sure.
I know what she means. Like
Yeah.
100% now, I know what she means. Like,
Yeah.
you can love somebody, but you don't have to like their personality, how they treat other people, how they say things, whatever. But
Yeah.
you just love them anyhow. You know,
Yeah.
that way, you're always good.
Yeah.
Even if they're not, you're all,
Yeah.
you do you, like, however you want to do
Yeah.
you. So, and that's how I've always kept. Like, I've just been, I've never, I don't care if you were rich, the richest person on the block, or had, two nickels to rub, as, growing up, or, sexual orientation, or whatever it is that you believe. I don't, to me, I don't care at
Yeah.
all. Like, I
Yeah.
love people. Like, I have so many different people, especially like with the documentary, meeting so many different
Yeah.
people and
Yeah.
how their experiences and like what they went through. And it's like, how can somebody else judge somebody or treat somebody different because of this? Like, it just, when I think about it, it just makes no sense to me. Like, how?
Yeah.
Like how? Like
Yeah.
my color my skin is different, so you have to treat me different. Like why? Or or this person believes this, so you have to treat them like I just don't understand it. I just don't.
Yeah, I think
So
it's a testament to your true nature that you don't, though, right? Because if we did understand it, we'd be like them. It doesn't make
yeah,
sense to us, and that's why we're on the other side of it. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's one of those things that I do think makes the horror genre so interesting, is because, and
Mhm.
it's not just these older films like ones we're talking about from the 80s and 90s, but even going further back and even coming into, the modern times, as it were, and
Yeah.
in 2024,
Yeah.
horror. I forget who said this. So if they end up watching this episode, comment and tell me it was you, because I'm drawing a blank. But someone specifically said one time that horror works best when it's in practice of empathy. And I think that that's such a great way to look at it,
Mm.
because a lot of people are like, oh, it's just blood and guts, or oh, it's just cussing, or oh, it's just sex, or oh, it's just these. But some of the best stuff that I've loved and connected with throughout my
Mhm.
entire life of watching horror has been stuff that was about people at their core and was about relatable situations, or
Yeah.
even if not something I could relate to, something that someone I cared about could relate to, or
Mhm.
and opening up those conversations and showing this side of reality that's not just wrapped up in, like, explosions, or a very simple romance, or these that some of these other genres kind of dive into. It takes that leap and goes into those things where I feel like some of these other genres are too scared to go.
Yeah.
um and it's just another thing I think that makes it so great as a whole.
It does, and like I said, that's why we always say bravo to the movies that can actually, you know, kind of
Yeah.
take the taboo and just be like, you know what, we're gonna talk about it,
Yep. Yeah.
and we're gonna put it in, horror because, like I said, horror it lets you open the idea or play with the idea of what if,
Yeah.
and it in so many ways, like either supernatural wise, fantasy wise, or
Yeah.
more realism, or
Yep.
hyper realism, or hyper reality. I mean, so it just gives you so many aspects to play with. When
Yeah.
you're talking about horror, I was
Yeah.
bullied growing up from literally from third to 12th grade. I was just bullied, and I turned that experience into one of my books. I gave it to one of my characters, and um, that was a way for me to release it.
Yeah.
And it, like I said, stories have such a way of getting it to be released, and like you said, it helps open up those conversations, because I've gotten so many people who bought that book and was like, oh, I was bullied too, and people I wouldn't even have thought may have been bullied, and then they start talking about their experiences and things that they went through, and I've even had people who said they were the ones who were doing the bullying,
Oh, wow.
and they how
Yeah.
they've kind of come to the other side now of that, and where they
Yeah.
realize like
Right.
what they did was like obviously not cool at all,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
but you've learned and you've grown from it, and that's why I'm somebody who doesn't like judge somebody by their past or who they were, or
Sure.
because we all, I mean, we're all in this world, we all learn, we all grow, we all come from different backgrounds, and
Yeah.
certain things we may have acted a certain way because that's how we were raised, and then once we get really out into the world
We're
and we
like,
see
oh,
like,
wait a minute.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so we
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
change, so you can't just go by that with some person. You have to give people chances. You can't, I mean, because
Mm.
everybody's going to mess up more than once.
Yeah.
Okay, like more
Yeah.
than once, and you just have to be patient with people,
Yeah.
because it may not happen when you want it to, but eventually, I mean, that's how I like to believe, like it'll eventually
Yeah.
happen, so
Yeah. 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 I hadn't really thought about the statement horror in your choices, as far as, like, the ones that are on your list, but there's quite a bit of that in there.
hmm
Which is an interesting, like,
yeah.
theme of, or connection between them. I don't know if the last one connects to that or not, because I actually have not seen this one.
This
Which is Massacre at Central High. This is the right poster,
yes,
I assume.
yes,
Okay.
yes, that's the new, like,
1976.
Not really. Yeah, it's an updated like Blu-ray because it finally came out. They updated it a few years ago finally because it was like kind of like an old DVD that was,
Oh, right.
just kind
Okay.
of old and worn, and yeah, so
Yeah. I have never seen this.
it's very obscure. It's very like a lot of people don't know about it.
Oh,
I actually came about it by accident.
okay.
In my early days of like Amazon searching, so this would have been like maybe around 2008, or
Yeah.
so, or 2009, and I used to just
Okay.
do like searches of horror, and then I saw this film, and I was like, Massacre at Central High, and like so I googled it, and I was like,
Yeah.
huh. I said, this sounds really cool. Ain't it 76? I said, I've never heard of it, so I bought the DVD, and it's one of those DVDs that like like that come overseas. Like it had no type of like
Yes.
remastered. So
Yeah.
the night scenes were like really dark and so but that
Yeah.
was the only version I had for so long. And when I
Yeah.
watched it, so the name is a little misleading because you think Massacre at Central High, you think somebody's like, walking around the school or at
Killing
night
everybody.
chopping people with an axe or or something.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like that at all. It's really a revenge horror movie, and nobody's wearing a mask. It's not like a who done it. You know exactly what's
Right.
going on and why they're doing it. And
Okay.
so it's kind
Huh.
of like, you kind of empathize with the one that's actually doing the killing a little bit. You're just kind of like, when you're watching, like, wow, like, because I'm never usually want to empathize with, the killer. Like, so I'm more of the, protagonist,
Mhm.
winning. But
Mhm.
this one was kind of like, wow, I'm kind of rooting for him. Like, I don't,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
and I'm just like, like I said, this is a person, this is like
Okay.
this is teenagers, like, or, supposed to be teenagers. Obviously,
Teenagers.
they're
Yeah.
obviously in their 20s,
Sure.
back in 76. But it's very unique in that there are no adult characters until like the last 10 minutes of the movie,
Okay.
like at all. It's basically these group of high school students who run the school. Like they have their own this little clique, and it's only about 5 of them, and they pretty much rule with an iron fist. When people walk by, they kind of shrink over, and
Dang.
if they say jump, the other characters say how high, they have to feed them lunch at lunchtime, like setting their plates around the table that they had. And I was like,
What?
what? And it's very a product of its time, like 76, the time of free love and protests and
Yeah.
speaking your mind, and
Yeah.
women having a voice, and it's all those things in there. And that's why I loved it, because it was just so different. And
Yeah. Sounds like it.
it, like I said, it took me like complete surprise when I first found it, and it became instantly one of my like top favorite films. Like I just watched it constantly when I had it. I was watching like probably like once every day for like a month. Just because I just never seen anything like it.
Huh.
And it has some characters that you see, like Kimberly Beck. Do you know Friday the 13th? A lot of the, like, Kim Beck from Part 4 played Trish.
Yeah.
She was in that when she was only about 20 years old when she was in it. Young Robert Carradine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
How have I
there's,
not
yeah,
heard of this before?
yeah. Like I said, it's very obscure. Like it.
Yeah.
I I talked about it to a guy at a con one time, and he told me it was the same guy who is working for the company that were trying to put out this Blu-ray, because I told him I had this old DVD. He said, hey, if the DVD is good, he said, would you mind if I borrowed it to try to remaster this? And I was a little skeptical. I was like,
I'm sure.
wait,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, give you my, I said, this is the only one I have, and they don't really sell this anymore. Something could happen to it. And well, I mean, whatever they did, they found it, because it was, the Blu-ray is beautiful. Like it's crisp, like none of those extra dark
Very
scenes.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and it came with like all these features with actors
Yeah.
coming back and talking about it, 40, 45 years later, so yeah, I highly recommend it. Like I highly recommend. Like I said, it's very a product of its time, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of like TNA in there because
Because
it, like I said, 76, and these are like kids who are like kind of on their own. But if you can kind of like, I mean, because I'm not like shy about that stuff when it comes like, but
sure.
when it's done like tastefully, and like I said, it's 76, like
Yeah.
that was going on during that
Yeah.
time,
No, for
so
sure.
So I mean, and to say not like every 10 minutes it's like going on. It's just like, there just certain like strong scenes, but
Sure. Yeah.
but it happened. I mean, 76 and like late 60s, that's what it was like kind of like all about, during
Sure.
that time. That's why I said it's a product of its time, so
Huh.
just like very unique.
Well, yeah, that one I know for sure has not been on the show before because
Yeah.
I had not even heard of it until you sent your list initially, and I was like, Massacre at Central. I don't think I know that one. And then I looked up the cover because I've had these pictures since we were
Hmm.
originally gonna record, and I was like, I definitely don't know this movie.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'll have to try to find it and see if I can watch it then, just at least out of sheer curiosity.
Yeah, if you, I think, because I was telling another friend about it, and I think he might have found it on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
A good place to
Um,
start. Yeah.
Is that I think he said it might have when he told me the time. I said it seemed like it might be cut in certain places. I'm not sure because I haven't watched
Oh
it,
yeah.
so you might
Huh.
not get the full version, or things might be cut out. But I mean, at
Right.
least you would get the
The
gist of
the yeah
of what's
concept
going
and stuff.
on. So, but like I would highly recommend it to anybody.
Cool.
Because it's another thing that deals with the taboo, and I love the fact that like I said, it's mostly teenagers because it's kind of like that um that I don't want to say it, not rebelling, but like that. What am I thinking about?
Teenagers, like how teenagers
Uh yes. All that word. It's
Rebellion is the only word that's coming to mind, but I know what
right.
you mean.
Yeah, there's another one where I was like, oh, it was like perfect, but it kind of like fits. It's revolt. That's what it is.
Oh,
Revolt.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it kind of has that element of it, that huge
Okay.
revolt element. And like
Huh,
I said,
okay.
like I said, I love taboo things, and when you can just really shock your audience, not just for shock value, but shock them in a way that's really going to make them think. So there's a difference,
Yeah.
to me. There's the cheap way of doing it, and then like to me the real way of doing it.
I know what you mean, yeah. Yeah,
So.
no, I feel the same way, very similarly about jump scares. It's like there's cheap ones and then there's ones that linger and actually leave an impact, and it's the same thing with things done for shock value. Sometimes the shock value is deeper than just the, "Oh my god," and then sometimes
Hmm.
it's not. So,
Yeah.
definitely understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I definitely understand.
So,
Um,
because I'll say for me, the one that has always lingered since I was 5 years old is the alley scene from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Still to this day,
oh, yeah.
that scene will still have me wrap. I don't even like really have nightmares anymore. I'm so desensitized now, and
Sure, yeah.
But when I randomly have a nightmare about A Nightmare on Elm Street, it's always some version of the alley scene. Like no matter
Oh,
what, it's always that, and it's like my
oh,
mind is already know it's coming. It's like I still think about those moments where in my head, in my dream, like I know it's coming, and I just immediately start freaking out in the dream. So I'm just like, oh my god, he's coming! Like just gonna that shadow when it hits the wall, and then she just
yeah.
turns around, and then his face goes in and out of the shadow. Because that's what I love about the first one. We don't really see the details of his face. It's more like
No, it's
shadows. It's
very well,
like
yeah. It's
hints.
he's a presence more than like a physical villain for most of it.
Yeah,
Like, it's a
yeah.
very, which I think is why it's so much scarier than some of the ones that came after, is because it's this very like what is it, what does he look like, what is he like it's a very like the less is more in that situation. Of course, then they lean
Mm-hmm.
into the comedy and then he's just on camera all the time, which is
Right.
equally as fun and great. But yeah, it's very like in and out, and it's you're trying to like your brain is filling in the rest of the picture, and that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is even scarier,
Scary.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
like I said,
yeah.
nobody's gonna believe you about him. Like, they'll
No, why
believe
would
that.
they? Yeah,
They've seen Michael, they've seen Jason, but Freddy's, in the mind, and that's why I say it's so. I actually wanted to hit on this and just why it's so much deeper than a slasher to
yeah,
me, and like why I see it as I call it dramatic horror or either
yeah,
fantasy horror, because one of the
yeah.
best examples I can use is from Nightmare 3, when the beginning, when Kristen's building the house and her mom comes home from her date and she's blasting the music, and her mom comes in, super
Oh,
hot headed, like, no, what are you doing? And get to
yes.
bed. And Kristen's trying to tell her, like, I'm still having those dreams. And her mom's kind of dismissive because she wants to get back to her date and like not really hearing her daughter. And she's kind of like, same routine is like, okay, fine, and then later on when, you know, for she's back in that scene and she thinks she kind of just dreamt that whole, thing, being at Weston Hills, for the moment. And now
Yep.
that situation completely flipped, like her mom's very receptive to her, and she hugs her and she's kind of smiling at her, and she's
Yeah.
telling her, I don't want to be alone, and she kind of has that look like she's just going to tell that guy, like, you need to go, like, I need to be with
Yeah.
you. And then right
Priorities.
when she thinks it happened, Freddie snatches her and like ruins that.
Yeah.
He's really, because he knows probably in Kristen's mind she wished that's how the situation had gone, so he messed with her, and then right when she was like feeling
Yeah.
happiness, snatches it away. That's so deep to me, and that's so psychological to mess with
Yeah. No, you're
someone's
yeah.
their emotions like that. And that's anybody who's had like a relation like that with their parents.
Hmm.
And that's what I love about it. It's so like, oh, like you can really feel that, and that's why I
Yeah.
just love the type of maniacal way Freddy toys with his victims, because like I say, Freddy could probably kill him like right away. You're in the nightmare. He
It's a
could,
toy though. It's like it's
yeah,
sort of like cat and mouse.
exactly. And
Yeah.
he really met, like, he basically, with all those kids in Nightmare 3, he was basically just shredding their minds. That's basically
Yeah.
what was happening. Like, he was making them weaker by destroying their minds. And that's what Kristen says. She says he's trying to make us weak, easy prey.
Yep.
He's just, not taking those little knots, knocking you down. Okay, I'll keep you in this dream for, a little bit, but I'll do this to you while you're here. And then the next time I'll do this. And then I'll do
Yep.
this the next time.
Yeah.
Just making you crumble each time. And that's way deeper than, just a common
Just
slasher,
stab and go. Yeah.
so.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Are you ever gonna write like what are they called? Like not like are you ever going to write about like these movies, like not as like using elements or being inspired, but like actually like the word is escaping me, the book form of a documentary
Like a tell-all, or
where yeah
not a tell-all, but
where you
um
write about like oh my god, it's like right at the tip of my tongue.
like an insider to the movies or
Well, kind of like
something.
a almost like a research paper, but in like book form, but about like Nightmare on Elm Street and all these things, like an analysis of, or something along those lines.
Oh, something like that.
Have you
I
ever
don't
thought about it?
know.
I'm just
I feel
curious.
like I may have thought about, like, especially like while I was in school, when they
Sure.
always had us like want us to do papers. I always try to like bring some type of horror element into my papers because I just
You
loved horror. Nobody ever
gotta
did
make it
that.
interesting. Yeah.
So I always wanted to try to find some way to like bring horror into it, which I did get to do a few times, but sometimes it's kind of hard to.
Yeah.
But I mean, definitely, for sure. Like, I would really like to just really love to break down and, you know,
Yeah.
see it like, I guess from my perspective, like why I see, this film like this, or this moment,
Yeah.
how I saw it like this. And, because
Yep.
like you said, a lot of fans, they just see Nightmare on Elm Street as a straight slasher. And,
Yeah.
I don't go over and say, no, you're wrong, it's not a slasher.
I
Like,
know
no,
what you
if
mean
that's
though.
how you feel
It's
about that, that's how you
yeah.
feel. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, like how you interpret it,
No, for sure.
but it's
Yeah, it
definitely
just
going to be
resonates differently with you as an
right.
well, and you have so much to say about it that I think
Hmm.
that it would just be kind of neat to read. Like, I know the word. There's a word for what I'm talking about, Anthony. I just cannot think of it. But it would be cool knowing and getting the opportunity to talk to you about these, even though this is relatively a shorter conversation about Nightmare, because we didn't, and, obviously we talked about other films, but
Hmm.
knowing the passion and the inspiration that you have for these and that they've had on you, it would be cool to read something like that. That's it. I was just inquiring if you had ever thought
Yeah,
to do that.
I
So
actually have. Like I said,
yeah.
I definitely have. Like it, and it would be
Yeah,
really cool to do something like that.
I
Just
agree.
because, yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, I love those films. Like
Yeah. It
so
shows. And
Yeah.
and I don't mean that in like a goofy way. I mean that in a very sincere way. Like you have a lot of really insightful things. And then even when you talked about the Fred Heads community that you built while making that documentary with these friends, and
Hmm.
there's just a lot there. Would just be really cool to be able to read that one day.
Yeah. And I definitely, like I said, I've been writing since I was a kid, but
Yeah.
being an older writer now, like, this, it, like when I watch movies, I watch them so differently now. It's like I have a different
Oh, I'm
eye
sure.
when I watch it.
Yeah.
Like, so when I break things down different,
Yeah.
so when people are just like bashing on the movie, like because like, oh, it didn't quite fit this way because it's not the way it goes. It's like my mind started. I said, well, they probably did it this way because of
Mhm.
maybe this is how like they did it in the first one, and now they want to try and do this, or this character, their development took a different turn this time, or or it's really,
Yeah.
I really break it down like that now, as opposed to
Yeah.
just saying like, oh, this was trash. They didn't do like what I was expecting. I mean, because
Right.
it's really hard for me to bash somebody's work now too. Like when I look at movies, because it's like,
Yeah.
because I know what I'm thinking. Like when I'm writing, and I could write. Like I said, the books I've written, there's so many people who got certain things out of it that I never even thought of. Like when I wrote it, I was
Yeah.
like to me, I said, oh, I just wrote it because of this. But when they had, for
It's
them, it's
yeah.
something totally different. Like and
Yep.
that's interesting to me, and I love that. I love
Yeah.
that they got something from it that I didn't.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I
That's what
look at
makes
things
that
now.
engagement so good, right? Is because then you
Hmm.
get to see the other perspectives and things on whatever the subject matter is, whether it's a book you've written or a movie or whatever. It's nice to have that back and forth. As long as you have it with somebody who's respectful, because let's be honest, not
Right.
everybody in the horror community knows how to just have those conversations. But
Conversations, right? Yeah, yeah. That bothers me because it's like just to be like what they call like creative criticism.
sure.
And it's very and you can't, and you definitely have to have a tough skin. Like you can't you
Sure.
know crumble because somebody says something negative about you. Like because otherwise you be crumbling every single day.
No, for sure.
You just kind of have to be like, like somebody said, well, I didn't really like it because it didn't like, okay. If you didn't like it, then I mean, that's fine. Like, it's not for everybody. I wrote the book for me.
No,
And then,
sure.
and the fact that I, published it and like other people are getting something out of it, that's just a bonus,
That's a bonus. Oh, yeah, that's a good way to look
So,
at it. Yeah.
so that's how I don't take offense. Somebody says, I didn't really like how you wrote it, or I didn't understand. Like I said, I get that,
Yeah.
So, because not everybody's going to, you
Yeah.
know.
No, for sure. Yeah. Well, cool. So, Nightmare on Elm Street, New Nightmare, Tales from the Hood, People Under the Stairs, and Massacre at Central High. Those were your
Mhm.
5. Thanks so much for making time to do this. This was a great conversation.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this. This was
Me
so
too.
awesome.
We'll come up with some other reasons for you to come back. We'll figure
Oh yeah,
something.
yeah. I'm always down to come back.
Yeah.
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 I love having these chats with
Yeah.
people who are like kind of like minded and
Yeah.
just
No, me
love the
too.
movies.
Yeah. Totally agree. Well, cool. Well, um, as I mentioned earlier, all of Anthony's links will be in the description for this episode. And if you have not watched Fred Heads, please go watch the documentary. It's on Tubi. You literally have no excuse not to watch it. Literally none. The ads are annoying, but I promise it's worth it.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out with this episode of Influential Horror. Hope you have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. We will see you in the next one.